Stand for what you believe in, speak out about what you stand for, and live like you mean it. This is not a dress rehearsal, it's the show. I saw this somewhere on Marty's one of her platforms that she wrote this about 7 years ago. Is that correct, Marty? Because I picked it up somewhere in one of your memories or
Probably,
something. I
probably,
did.
yeah.
So I'm going to say these are your words written about 7 years ago.
They
Our
are
guest
my
today,
words.
yeah, Marti MacGibbon. And it's actually hard to describe Marti. I mean, I really can't keep up with her. And in a couple of minutes, you'll understand why when you start hearing about her incredible journey, her life, her resiliency. But here are a few things I want you to know about Marti that I think are very important. Number one, motivational speaker, humorist, right? We want to laugh sometimes. We don't want to cry all the time, everybody. A certified addiction treatment professional, author of 2 nationally award-winning and critically acclaimed memoirs, Never Give In to Fear and Laughing All the Way Up from Rock Bottom, and Fierce, Funny, and Female. There you go. Actually, I just ordered the book, so I don't even have them, to be truthful, in front of me, but I'm getting them. So there you go. We'll have all the information in the body of the video, how everybody can support you and buy your books. A must. Marti is an expert on trauma resolution and addiction. And we're going to speak a little bit about this trauma because I feel like, Marti, it's a word thrown around and maybe people really don't understand what it means, but you're going to fill us in, and also about addiction. And you hold 5 professional certifications in your specialized field, including advanced certified relapse prevention specialist and certified addiction-free pain management specialist. You're an advocate for victims and survivors. You have spoken at the White House, the State Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, and the Office for Victims of Crime on Mental Health and Policy Advocacy. Few speakers really have a story like this. I have to be honest, warriors listening, I don't really know of anybody else who has a story like this. Your comeback, I don't want to say your comeback, I want to say your journey is very inspirational, and you've recovered and you have triumphed over the most unbelievable things. I mean, it's really a movie script, including being trafficked to Tokyo, held prisoner by Japanese organized crime. Oh my goodness. Homelessness, domestic violence, severe PTSD, hardcore drug addiction. Marti, this is why we love you, because you have come out of this, come through this. You continue to work in this with effective strategies, things that other people can do to not only have you transformed your life, but you're brave enough to want to help others. And that is exactly what people need today. They need motivation, they need encouragement and energy. And you certainly have that. So we believe at the Warriors, people more than ever in 2024 need, in this overwhelming environment, they need you, Marti. So Marti MacGibbon, you exemplify the meaning of warrior. I want everybody, go to the website, martimacgibbon.com. Again, everything will be in the body of this video. Marti, it is time to finally hear from you because I'm talking so much. There's so much to say about you. So welcome, Marti, to the Warriors.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you for having me here.
I mean, absolutely. I can't wait to talk to you, but I want to start with, tell us a little something about Marti, whatever you want. It could be about your childhood. It could be about something now, just something you want to share.
Oh boy.
It's a loaded question for you. I know.
You mean just trivia?
Well, it's like whatever you want. It's like, anything you want. I don't care.
You're talking about the places that I've spoken. I spoke at the United Nations last year.
Okay, good. I didn't.
The United Nations for World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. So
yes.
I spoke on a panel at that event, and I talked about some of the, I talked about some of the mental health stuff, but that was really fun.
That was fun.
I have to go up on my website. So if anybody, it's an 8-minute video, but it talks about the tactics that the perpetrators use and the trauma, and the 3 T's are the tactics, the trauma, and the tendency to protect those who are harming, for the victim, you know what I mean? Or survivor, if you want.
Wow. So let me ask you, so that was your first time at the UN? That was your first time speaking?
Yeah, that was first time speaking there. I've been to the women's, the conference in March, the women's, but yeah, I got to speak there, which is something that I just like, oh my God, I thought, oh brother, there were people on this panel that were like, I saw other people's bios, the day before, and I was like, there were people that like prosecuted war crimes at The Hague, stuff like that. I mean, but I
Okay.
went in there and yeah, but it was such an honor to be there. And I'm a speaker. That's what I do. I was a comedian. I went from the time I was a little girl. I wanted to be a stand-up comic. I could
Really?
and yes, and
Wow.
yeah. I wanted to be a comic, and there wasn't much to see for role models. This was like in the time of, I guess I'll say my age. They always say don't tell people your age.
Why? I tell people my age all the time. I don't care.
I just turned 70, so I'm like,
Good for you.
time. And yeah, but people don't guess my age. And now I just gave it away on this podcast. But anyway, back then there just wasn't that much. There were maybe that you could see, and I would watch the late night. But
I do too. Let me tell you something, Marty. I'm 63, so I'm behind you a little bit.
You know what I'm talking about. So I would watch
Toady Fields. I used to watch like Toady Fields. Remember Toady Fields? Like
I
never
saw her. But yeah, but I would try to just see whatever my parents would let me stay up late enough to see. Anyway, and then when I was sexually assaulted by a school teacher, sexually abused, and by this guy, and who was like a young teacher we all thought was cool. And that was when I was 15. And it was like after that initial trauma, that dream of being a comedian, some of those dreams just sort of faded, right? And I immediately started using, I did drugs for the first time, right after that, right? So that was the first time I used drugs. And I didn't ever tell anyone, I just had this untreated trauma. And then that would continued on with a lot of different trauma, right? And those are things that exacerbated my drinking or drugs or whatever. Right. So, those were things that happened. And then I got my life together. I mean, I made it through adolescence, and I had a lot of trauma. I mean, sexual assault, sexual abuse. I had but as an adult, I stumbled across comedy again, right? And I had worked in the oil field. I was one of the first women to work in the oil field in Texas, right? And
I read that.
I would set off explosives and stuff. And these guys, like I got one of the jobs over the phone. I was like, yeah, it is Marty. And I kind of made my voice a little bit lower. And these good old boys would be on there. Oh, Marty, come on down to the job on Monday, and I'd go down there and they'd be like, you Marty? And their voice would go up a couple of octaves because they were in shock, like, you Marty? And I would be like, that's right. You an equal opportunity employer, like that kind of thing. And then I would work, and I worked and competed in that. And I was good. I made money. I was doing all right. And then the bottom dropped out of the oil business, And so then I was back to waiting tables. And when I was waiting tables, I was in Austin. People were saying, oh, the comedy club just opened up. You're so funny. You should go down there and try comedy. And I was like, you're crazy. But then I did. I went down there and tried it, and I got some laughs. And then I was actually doing my dream as an adult. It was like, oh, I can't believe it. I've come across comedy. So I was working on my act and everything, and I was starting to get paid. And I had a kind of a local following in Austin. And then I moved out west, and now this is turning into a monologue, so I'm going to stop. But those are some things about me. So comedy is real important to me, and laughter is really important to me. And in my life and in my family, we've always had a really great sense of humor, both my folks and my brothers and sisters. And we really value that, the sense of humor, even if it's a dark sense of humor, but to have that ability, right? So that's one of the things that I think carried me through a lot of the things that I went through, that, and just a sense of pride and a sense of like a fighting spirit. And I don't mean a toxic pride. I mean a kind of a pride of like, just be proud of who you are, and stand your ground kind of thing. And so, so that's what I'm saying about me. I wasn't funny at the United Nations though, because, they have interpreters and everything. You can't do
It's very serious at the United Nations. I was just there a few weeks ago for
Yes,
World
it's very
Trafficking Day, July 30th.
Yes, that's when I was there last
They're
year for that thing. And they had in
they're
my
very
bio, I
serious.
put at the end, Marty has traveled the United States as a professional comedian. I just put it in at the end, and they were reading it for the intro, and they said, "This is my favorite part of the bio." And so
See?
then I had to tell them when I started, I was like, "Don't worry, I'm not going to try to make you laugh. There's no burden there. You're not going to have to make an effort. I'm really talking about something serious here." So that was kind of fun. But that's the thing that I still do is I try to look for the humor in things,
Yeah.
even just to keep, because that's how we who are warriors, right? We
Mhm.
who are resilient, we who have that spirit of just fighting not only for our own freedom, but fighting for others. This is what I love so much about you and the warriors and what you're doing. You're
Thank you.
standing up for everyone. And that is such a tremendous thing. It's so noble,
Thank
and
you.
it's so powerful, because when you're looking at things that are like things that are greater than yourself, right? When you're standing for what's greater than yourself, you have this tremendous freedom and power, and it's
Mhm.
healing. You know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Altruism
Yeah.
goes along with post-traumatic growth and healing from trauma, is getting a hold of that idea of, how can I help others? That helps to
Yeah.
heal us, and it helps to keep us like steady and balanced,
Mm.
and we have, so
Yeah,
that's
no, no, no. I mean, I just there. I'm telling you, we have to have a 10-part series. There's so much to talk to you about. I feel very fortunate as I've gotten older, and I was finding out, knowing about trafficking, knowing about domestic violence, knowing all these things, but not really knowing, right?
Yes, me
And
too.
I didn't. I
I
had
didn't know anything about it until it happened to me, and then I didn't know what it was.
I didn't see. This
Sometimes
is
that
why I
happens.
feel fortunate. I have a duty to you, Marty, and to everybody.
Mhm.
You know, all women and girls, men and boys
Yes,
too, but, women and girls
yes.
that I had a great childhood, great parents. I never
Me too.
had this happen to me,
Yeah,
and it breaks my heart that this happens to others. So, instead of just, a lot of people talk about it. Yeah, we all know it's bad and horrible and ugly. Okay, but what are we
yeah,
gonna do to change? We need to change things, right? We hear so much talk, which is good. In the last few years, a lot of groups, lots of organizations, lots of talk, but
yeah.
we have to have follow through. We have to have more
Yes.
people, the public, we have to get them on board. We have to get in
Well,
there and
here
intervene and prevent, not just
well,
slap the band-aid
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Of course, we have to help survivors. That's a given. But
yeah,
how do
but
we
we
how do
have
we get to that
prevention.
prevention?
You're
How do
talking about
we
prevention, and part of
prevention?
that
Yes.
is to make the public aware and to say, if you see something, say something, right?
Yes.
That kind of thing. But also, we need to address, if we really wanna slay this dragon, we've got to look at all the things that are there along with it, poverty, racism, misogyny, um, um, just all of the injustices, that are there. And when we address, it's like, Maslow's pyramid, right? For instance, when we want to empower survivors, right? We want to make sure that we can meet them, meet the
Mhm.
needs, meet the needs. And this is true for, and I'm just going to say people instead of survivors, people who have been abused, people who have been victims of, gender-based violence, any of the different things, when people are harmed, right? One of the things that can really, like in my life, when I was harmed, I didn't dare go to anyone to talk about it. I was overwhelmed with shame and fear. And they didn't have a name for human trafficking, but they had a name for domestic violence. They had names for some of the things that I had experienced, but I didn't go get help because I was so afraid and so ashamed, right? And that I learned later when I became a mental health professional. I learned that that's part of the biology of trauma. Part of the biology of trauma is that there's the shame and the feelings of self-loathing and some of those other things. And then also like a tendency to want to kind of deflect the blame from the actual person who's doing the abuse and the exploitation. And so there are things like that are part of they're products of trauma, and trauma is psychological and biological. But the cool thing is, and if I'm going too far off topic, just interrupt me because I talk a lot.
No, because I wanted to get into my next question to you was I want to get into trauma. You're doing it. You're doing my job for me. No, but I want people to understand this trauma. They're not. I'm really stuck on it lately.
Yes, trauma is I
don't understand what it really means.
Trauma is a driving force. Okay, so a traumatic event is something. It's like an earthquake. If they're really, an earthquake is like a metaphor for a traumatic event. Okay, because it shakes, and there are magnitudes, just like there are magnitudes of earthquakes, there are magnitudes of traumatic events, right? Sometimes you're shaken, but you're okay, right? Sometimes you're shaken so far that your whole house is in pieces, right? It depends on, so trauma is like that. And then when that happens, we rebuild, right? But if everything is gone, see, one of the things that happened to me, because I had this downward spiral when I was in a domestic violence relationship, and I was at the height of my comedy career. I had a Tonight Show scheduled, but I met this guy. I went into a bar, to be honest, I went into a bar to score some cocaine, as one does when one is a recreational drug user in the 80s.
And going on the Tonight Show.
So I met this guy, and he was a handsome sociopath. And I didn't even see it coming. Because I came from a family where there wasn't violence. I mean, I knew about it, but it hadn't happened to me. I didn't know this. And I just thought, anyway, he programmed me. It was crazy. And I was smarter than he was. I was everything.
Right.
Or maybe not smarter in the ways that he was smart, but I was better educated than he was. But anyway, this thing was happening. So all I could think of was, I've got to get out of this. I got to get away from this guy. I got to raise some money and just get away from this guy. And then I met this woman who she ended up being my trafficker, right? But she was like, oh, you can make some fast money. I've got an escort service. All you got to do is go to Japan and date these Japanese businessmen. And I was just so desperate. I was at that point living in my car, like maybe staying in a motel every once in a while. I had this crazy man beating me, attacking me and everything. And so I went, and I was just the perfect victim because I had no address at that point. I was perfect to disappear. And when I went over there, and I wrote a couple of books. We're not going to go into detail, but it was organized crime. And it was terrifying. It was horrible. But I did escape. I got away. Somebody helped me to escape. And so I was there about a couple of months. And when I got back, I was so traumatized. And I already had trauma. I already had earlier trauma as a young person, right? So I already had that. But then this thing of every day, every hour, I was traumatized daily, hourly. It was. So when I got back, I was so happy to be back. And then the trauma hit me, and then I couldn't function. So I couldn't function in society anymore. I was overwhelmed by the trauma. And I thought, well, I can't go tell people what happened. I can't go to the police. I can't go get help even from a rape crisis center, because how am I going to tell them that I was raped every hour? You know, I just can't. And so, and again, like I said, back in the 80s, they didn't, this was 1985 when I was trafficked. So it was, you know, got back just before Christmas. And it's kind of a cool story. But anyway, but I had such a preponderance of, you know, of problems, you know, just problems that I couldn't address that trauma. I had nowhere to live. I had this violent man. I went back to the guy, the violent boyfriend, and went back to the drugs that I was doing when I left. I was doing drugs. You know, I was like, went back to that situation, and then found out many years later when I finally got into therapy, I found out that that's normal for someone who is traumatized. So there are a lot of things people don't know about trauma, but the thing about it is that it shakes you to your core. And then part of that is, you know, I said the biology of it, and then the brain is affected. The memories, there's a part of the brain, there's the amygdala. People talk about the amygdala with trauma. That's the survival part of your brain. And it's like an alarm system that goes off like a smoke alarm, and it shuts down other areas so you can focus on just staying alive, right? That's what happens. And then there are parts of the brain like the hippocampus, which is, it orients us in space and time, who we are, where we are, right? It's kind of like an internal GPS for finding your way, finding directions. And it's also a thing of where you are in your life and events. And so when you get traumatized, you have these floating memories. It's like a file cabinet tipped over, and all the files are all over the place, and you've got to pick them all back up. That's why sometimes people report a crime and they don't have to have everything in order as to how it happened, right? Because it's floating. It's the hippocampus. But the beautiful thing about all of this that I want to tell you when I talk about trauma, post-traumatic growth is a thing. It's a real thing. And we never hear about it. Like, I was trauma and addiction and studying, never learned about post-traumatic growth. And then learned about it about 8 years ago, learned about it. And it happens. It's natural. Trauma is actually a natural thing, because life is unpredictable, right? We all kinds of things can happen, right? But we as humans have this innate resiliency to be able to deal with things. So we heal. And a lot of times we don't develop post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, only a small amount of people really do develop the disorder, you know, but they always talk about PTSD, and it's real scary, right? And then it's, oh, you can get vicarious PTSD. Oh, and yeah, it is. I'm not making fun of it. I mean, it is scary, because I know when I worked with clients, I would be careful not to, you know, to just be careful. But the thing is, post-traumatic growth, and there's also vicarious post-traumatic growth. So you can get vicarious post-traumatic growth from walking alongside someone who is going through trauma and doing it with empathy, right? So it's a science. They discovered it in 1987, but they don't talk about it. So what
we got to talk about this. We got to, I mean,
I developed some, about a couple of years ago, I developed a presentation on it. And I've been going around to places whenever I can and doing presentations on this, because for service providers, for anyone, you know, for people to know that there's this light side of trauma. I mean, maybe that isn't a good way to say it. There's a flip side to trauma. So, and the post-traumatic growth starts out on a parallel. It's on a parallel with the post-traumatic stress after the event. But the things that can block it are, number one, the tendency to blame oneself in some way, which I did. I totally blame myself for every traumatic thing that ever happened to me. I blame myself. And then also having too many problems to address, you know, to be able to address, you know what I mean? So that can
through it. You're saying so much going on. It was overwhelming to work
It can
through it.
block the post-traumatic growth and the trauma
Of
resolution
course.
from happening.
Yeah.
And I went in that state for years, and I was using drugs, and I was just a street person, for like almost 10 years after getting back from Japan. And because I was in that cycle, right? But then at a certain point, I turned my life around and I started onto the path for post-traumatic growth. But the cool thing, and I'm giving you a monologue, but I got to tell you what
No,
was
talk.
in those 10 years of misery. And I was homeless. I was like under the bridge homeless. And I was like, I was working like digging ditches and chopping firewood and stuff like that to make like $20 a day. And then I would buy a little bit of meth so I could stay awake because it was cold and I didn't always know if I was going to be able to find a place to sleep. So this cycle went on for about 3 years. Anyway, I was out there and I kind of had just like the essentials for survival in a backpack, right? And there was one non-essential, and it was a pair of high heels, my favorite pair of high heels that I'd managed to hang on to out of all my stuff. I'd lost everything. Just my car had been stolen. Everything was gone. And I had this guy following me, this man who I went back to who beat me almost to death. And I was running from him, and he was following me, and he would catch me and then he would assault me. It was just like it was terrible. But I had these high heels and they were like my symbol of hope. I would use them to visualize, and visualization really does work. But I would take them out of the backpack, like under the bridge or something. And I'd go, all right, one of these days I'm going to get on my feet and I'm going to go dancing. And I would make that promise to myself. And so one night I was hitchhiking from this one town to another. This is Northern California, right? Really cold, foggy night. And I was trying to hitchhike and there was nobody coming. And then this guy stopped and he gave me a ride, and he was so sweet. He was good looking. I mean, he just like, he was gorgeous and handsome, and he was charming. And he had this dog. He had this real sweet dog. His dog sat on my lap and I was petting the dog and we were talking. And I kept my clothes clean, and I'd find ways to get a shower every once in a while. So you couldn't really tell I was homeless, but we were talking. And this was the first time anybody had ever like treated me like a human being in years. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, this is a guy I could date. And then I had that self-loathing that comes with trauma and addiction. And it was like, oh, you can't do that. You're a wreck. You could never have love. But you know what? We all have that inner critic or inner self-loathing. We all have it, right? But I want to tell you and tell everybody that's listening today that part of us is always wrong. It's always wrong. And the case in point is that guy and I, not only did we go dancing, but he's my husband today. And we've been together for 37 years.
I saw that on your Facebook. I saw the
and yes, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like a Cinderella story, but he was in the drug world too. So it was kind of like a Cinderella story as told by Quentin Tarantino for a while. It was
okay.
Really,
that's okay. That's okay.
It was really wild for a while. And my books, this book tells about it, never give interference. But we came out of that world. We came out of that world together, and we changed our lives, and we rebuilt things, and we did, we took contrary action against any kind of harm we'd done to ourselves or to the house we were renting from our slum landlord or whatever, like we did all that. And we changed our lives. And that's what we've done for the past 37 years. It's just been a really wonderful uphill climb. And that's what recovery is, whether it's recovery from mental illness or addiction or trauma or all of those. It's a real thing. And there are, there's estimated about 25 million addicts in the United States, including alcohol and other drugs. But there are 23.5 million adults in the United States who report a life in recovery from addiction, right? So we're almost catching up. We've got 1.5
Yeah.
million. Yeah. But I mean, it's a real thing. This is all real. Post-traumatic growth is real. Recovery is real. Human trafficking is real. All these things are real, even if we don't know that they exist. That's what happened to me. The bad things that happened to me, I didn't know they existed. I had this fortunate life, and it was so mind-blowing to me to think that there were people that were predatory that would seek to completely destroy me. I mean, that was just one of the problems I had with coping with the trauma from being trafficked to
Right.
Japan.
Of course.
It was just like, but then, once I was off the drug, see, the addiction blocked me and kept me on the back foot. But once I was able to change that, right, and start into recovery, then I could begin healing. But I didn't address the trauma for 10 years. I didn't address what happened in Japan. I would just avoid it, right?
Right.
So after about 10 years, and I was back doing stand-up. I was going to college, I was on a great path, and all of a sudden comes these flashbacks, and I had an emergency where I had to go to mental health care, and it changed my life. I mean, it just walking in there, and I was so scared to go in there. I was just terrified because I had things happen to me by mental health professionals that were horrible when I was a young person. So, but I went in there, and this therapist, I was telling her, well, I went out and tried to kill myself last night, but I turned back because and I was telling her, and I said, and it all started because, can I use the word I used? And I told her, and this is the first time I'd ever even spoken about what happened, about the nightmare of what happened in Japan, where I was tortured, And I said, well, it all started when I was a whore in Japan. And again, the self-loathing part. And I'm laughing, everybody, because I'm so happy now. And I can look back at that and kind of laugh from the point of someone who's been a therapist. Sometimes you're in a counseling session and a client tells you something where you're just like, but I said that to her, and it was such a safe space. And she said, in a really therapeutic voice, she said, we don't do name calling in therapy. And that just completely, it was like a door opened, a gate opened, and there was just all this light, warm light just came into my inner being. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have to, and I saw in a flash the name calling, the victim blaming, all those things without words, right? I saw them. And I was able to begin to forgive myself again, because I had forgiven myself from a lot of things, but I hadn't confronted the trauma, and then I began that process of healing and forgiveness. And a lot of times, and the reason I told you a long story is the key to the post-traumatic growth and the trauma resolution. A lot of times it's the story. If we can change the story that we've told ourselves. Sometimes it's a story that's in our mind the first time we were traumatized, where we blamed ourselves. And sometimes it's a story that's injected by a perpetrator, an abuser, who, they will inject those kind of thoughts into someone's vulnerable mind, right? It's your fault, you're no good, those kind of things. But when you begin to empower, a big part of empowerment, she empowered me with that little collection of words,
Yes.
it's a few words. And she continued to, I would say, and I was telling her the things that happened to me in Japan. And I said, and then I did this and I did this, and I don't know why I didn't fight harder, And she said, Marti, this all just sounds like what you're telling me. This says so much more about the people that were around you and their ill deeds than anything you did, She said it gently, and so that I could slowly kind of think, wait a minute, this wasn't done by me. This was done to me. So
Exactly.
that beautiful healing. And then I went back to school. I became a counselor. I worked with special populations for a few years. And then at my husband's suggestion, I built this speaking business. And what I've done with that is just go around the country and encourage people who are the service providers, who are those who support people who are where I once was, right? And I taught a life skills class in a county jail for women for about 4 years, just on and off. When I was in jail,
Wow.
do the life skills class. And in the life skills class, we would laugh. I would tell them stories, I'd tell them, oh, you think you effed up? Let me tell you about it, and just get them laughing. But it was an outreach class for a human trafficking task force and for the domestic violence shelter. So I was looking for people who were actually victims who were being cycled through, I was doing that. But it was also life skills. And I would teach this basic cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness meditation kind of things. But I would teach them in a real casual way, so they didn't know they were even getting any of that.
Wow.
But I would tell the stories and I'd make them laugh. And, tell them your story, what you're telling yourself in here, what your story is. You're the only one that gets to decide what goes on in here. That's how I survived Japan. I just told myself, okay, I get to say what happens here.
Right.
I don't have control over the external, but and I did that. And I used some visualizations and some things to, and I didn't know they were called visualizations, but I just kept saying, I'll be out of here by Christmas, and I did get out of there by Christmas. But I'm not saying it was like magic that I made it happen. I'm not like that. I'm not saying it's like, like that, but it just, as luck would have it, I happened to, but, I would tell these women in jail, because they were traumatized just by being arrested, and I'd tell them, okay, did you know that you're strong and brave and amazing, or you wouldn't have made it this far? And they'd be like, made it this far? We're in jail. And I'm like, yeah, but you're in jail, but you're smiling, you're laughing, you're here.
Right.
And I tell them, do you know that going to jail is one of the terrible, terrible nightmares that regular people, regular, successful citizens, they're most terrified of? And I said, and here you are. I said, what does that say about you? And I would tell them I'd been in jail too. I'd been in jail my share of times. I've been in jail, right?
Yeah.
So I know, but I'd say, what does that say about you? And they'd say, it means we effed up. And I'd be like, no, it means you are powerful. You are strong. You're courageous. That's what that says about
But
you.
Marti, nobody talks the way you're talking.
But I do. And that's why
I know you do. That's why I'm like, I got to get to Marti. Like,
that's why I would talk to these women in jail and I'd say,
this is what we need. This is what we need.
Be proud. You're in here. And if you can turn around and help a woman next to you to have a better day, if you can do that, that makes you even more powerful and even more of a hero. And I just don't, because it's changing the story, and that heals trauma. When we change the story, we can start by what we say about our own selves, right? And then we can, move in. And we would do exercises like in the class. And I took those exercises because we made them up in the jail class. But I would take those, and they were based on cognitive behavioral therapy. And I went around touring with that speech. I'd do it as a breakout session, and we'd do that. We called them game changers. Wow. And we do the game changer exercises. And I've taught those game changers to people that are like, cops and, lawyers, whatever, but
they need a lot of game changers. They need to know how to deal.
And they're quick and portable, because they say, make a gratitude list. We don't have time to make gratitude lists. When we most need gratitude, I can't sit down and write it. But if you can pick your big three, Lynn, if you can pick, what are my big three things in life that I'm most thankful for? Well, for me, it's like I'm alive. I'm not I'm not strung out, and I'm not locked up. I mean, I'm free, right? I'm moving around, right? And those are my three, right? Everybody has their three. And then if you can think of those big three, that can be your big three gratitude. You can do that in a couple of seconds. And then that can change your whole
Yes.
attitude on life, right?
That's why we
So
need
there's
you,
a lot of
Marty.
cool
No,
stuff.
but that's why we need you. That's why you're such a warrior. That's why we need to hear your voice even more. We need another book, even the gratitude part. No, because everybody moaning and groaning, complaining.
Oh, I do
Okay.
that too, and I
We
get
all we all
get
do it.
tired.
We
Yeah.
all do it.
But
But
it doesn't help us. It doesn't
it
help
doesn't
us.
help at all. If you can push it away, think of a
Yeah,
couple of things, as you pointed out, the big three for gratitude, snap your brain out of it,
yeah.
or
And sometimes just to
move
move
forward.
around a little bit, like, moving your shoulder, like maybe you can't get up from your desk and dance, right? But you
Why
can
can't you? Why can't you? I used to do that and put
you
on
can't,
80s
well, see, I
music.
do too. I do too. But I
Because
mean,
I
if we
think
were
I
gonna
think
do
music and dancing is very
I
therapeutic.
know you're so talented and so beautiful. You're
No,
wonderful.
no,
But
no,
you
but
have
but
that
moving.
voice, and you're a
Yeah.
warrior. And these little things, these little game changers that I was teaching those women, those are weapons of war, you know?
Yeah, and
They're
and and
weapons.
I'm using all your stuff. I'm like your new
Yeah.
student because
And the
that
special yeah, Lynn, the special forces, when they train the Navy SEALs, right?
uh-huh.
Or the Army Rangers, when they train the special forces, they teach them gratitude. They teach them visualize, you visualize your goal, winning,
Right.
getting your goal, you give thanks, you do that. They have a whole thing. And on their list of things that you want to take into battle with you, sense of humor is about number 3 or 4. I mean, they teach the people that teach the SEAL Team
Yeah,
6 how to go
but
in
but
and
Marty, we
they
know, and there
teach
are
the stuff
studies.
we do.
No, but
They teach the
laughing
same stuff.
laughing is therapeutic. We know laughing
It
is
is.
therapeutic.
It
Laughing is
is.
also infectious. If you laugh with
Yes.
other people, start laughing.
Yeah, and they
So,
teach that in the military too, that the positive emotions are more contagious and more
yes,
powerful than the negative ones are.
there you go.
So anything
So
that can get us to feel a positive emotion, that's why the gratitude, the big three, just, anything that can displace. Well, you're an actor, right? Actress. So,
no, no, I'm not. No, I'm
well,
not.
I thought
I
you were acting.
no, I told out of college, I went into the jingle business. I used to
Oh,
write music. I did the Clairol campaign at
oh,
one point, Volkswagen,
really?
MTV.
Oh,
I was
girl, I
like
have seen that.
Popeye's fried chicken,
Oh my gosh.
like that's what I did
Oh, you're
before,
fantastic.
and then transitioning, married, children, all of that.
Right?
Then working, kids are older, then
Yeah.
working in kind of PR, kind of working in,
Yeah.
Broadway producing. I did some shows.
Oh,
Not
wow.
never acting. I always wanted the business end, behind the scenes, more creative, and then found myself in this world and with you today that I never could have imagined or thought, but is the most fulfilling. I have the
Yeah.
most passion, and I just wanna share with you that I wanna get back to that. I just had my first a couple of days ago. I have a collaboration with an art studio here in New York down on Broome Street where I'm bringing survivors. We
Visual
just got
art.
I bring they paint, we put music, whatever kind of music. We had disco music going, okay, that's what they wanted,
Yay.
and we talk and we paint, and I have lots of food and stuff, and it's just being, right?
Yeah.
There's no expectations. It's being for a couple of hours, and we talk
Yes.
and paint.
Oh, that's
So I wanna get more into providing that for people, providing
oh,
more music,
yes,
dance.
because that's a pathway to healing. That's one of the
Yes,
things. The arts are one of the pathways to healing and building post-traumatic growth. And we're all in the market for post-traumatic growth. We went through COVID. But there are five benefits. They call it the 5 fields of post-traumatic growth, and you can Google them. But I mean, if I can remember, there's a deeper appreciation of life, um, and ability to see more limitless opportunity, right? To be able to expanded vision of that. And then also deeper and more meaningful relationships with others. Right. And, oh my gosh, I can't remember what this one is. Well, there's seeing oneself as victor rather than victim,
Yeah.
There's one more, and I can't remember what it is. There's 5 of them, but I'm not going to go look for it, but
I'll find the list, because the body of the video is going to have like a lot of information for everybody to be
there's
reading.
5 fields, but the thing is, they're all really great things that happen, and they discovered it because they were doing these research projects on people who had gone through horrible things, and they would find like thousands of participants, and people were saying, well, I never would want this to ever happen to me again or to anyone I know ever. But if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have had these things. And then they would all list these 5 things in their lives that had change. Oh, greater self-confidence and self-reliance.
There you go. That's a big one. Yeah, that's a good one.
But that's how they discovered it. Is they stumbled across it, and then they're like, hey, this is a thing. And now, we only hear the negative side of it. That's why I'm wanting to get people out there and talking about that. Hey,
we got to get you, we got to get you like even more on the road, and also to make people laugh.
Yeah.
Like, actually, everything you said so far today, I mean, all of this information, everything you've done, Marti, first of all, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart, is exactly, and I don't have your credentials, like with your, certifications, but it's so in tune with my thinking.
Oh, no, you have it. And
thing,
just by the gender thing, what you were doing, that's a cognitive behavioral kind of thing, because if you create sayings like little mantras, or what those jingles are, they're little affirmations, and they stick in people's minds, right? That stick-to-itiveness, you've got that skill. That's a therapeutic skill.
There you go. There you go. I'm a therapist. Well,
well, I don't know what you're motivated.
Where to go with all this. There's so much. We're going to have like part 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me finish up with, I have a big question for you. You've been in this world for a while.
Yeah.
Finish us up with what do you see as the biggest change in the I'll just say last decade or something like that, in this whole field? What's your take on that, the landscape?
I think one of the biggest things, and it's been a really beneficial force for change, is to recognize people who have experienced the crime, and again, you said you don't like the survivor word, but lived experience, expertise, knowing the people who have experienced human trafficking. The government, recognizes now. Actually, I did legislative advocacy with a group of other survivors, a group of us about 10 years ago. And we got some people we got this bill passed called the Human Trafficking Survivor Empowerment Act. And what it did was it signed it, and they signed it into law. Obama signed it into law. That's why I was at the White House and those other places, because we went over on a team, where we talked to people about how to implement. But what we got passed was that survivors or lived experience experts would be, that their expertise, lived experience expertise, and other expertise would be recognized and compensated by the federal government.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
We get paid at the scale, which is $81.25 an hour. That's the federal scale. So that happened with that bill. And the other thing that we got in that bill was that there would be a council of survivor advisors to the president, right? And between 8 and 13 lived experience experts to be on that, and we have that. So we got that signed into law, and I met Chandra while we were advocating for that.
I remember, and that, listen, if
we got that passed, and then that's changed the culture throughout the nonprofits and so many other situations, where,
Yeah.
because, I came into the movement in 2009. The TVPA was passed in 2000.
Right.
I came out publicly in 2009 because I just wanted to come out and tell people, hey, adults get trafficked. It happens. And you can still have a happy life. I mean, you can still, but the people that I knew, some of my colleagues, would tell me about how they would be asked to come to some fancy event and to speak, or they would be asked to assist on a project, but they were never paid. Where they,
Yes.
so that's where, when we got that law change, it's been really good. And I think because of that, and then also in 2014, when they passed the TIP report, trafficking in persons
Mhm.
report, there was a whole section of that TIP report that talked about the expertise and the contribution that those who have experienced the crime, what they call survivors. I think now they're calling lived experience expert. Maybe a little bit both. They ask you what you want to be called now, but anyway, but that work and that effort has been a tremendous help to not only our federal government, but then also in countries around the world. So now there's a way of making sure that nonprofits who are, say, operating, for them to have survivor advisement, participation
Yeah.
in the, so I think that's been a real big positive. I really do, because then,
Yes.
well, that's also helped for the young, I wouldn't say young, but survivors who are just exiting now. They can find out, if they're fortunate enough to, to
Right.
have help upon exiting, and we work really hard. I know you do, and I do. We do at Mentari. We work really hard to see that people have their needs taken care of and that they know. But that exists in a way that someone just exiting that nightmare can look and see, oh, there are people who 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 have lived through this, and they can see role models of people who have
Right.
actually, they have expertise, they've gone on to get their degrees and, whatever, but people, they can see that it's something. You're not a discarded, forgotten human being. You can have a way to play a role in the, in making, combating. And,
Yeah.
domestic violence survivors, they know that they can do that too, right? They're offered a role in, not offered a role, but there's that with people
That
who have
there's the pathway. There is a
sexual
pathway of
assault,
positivity.
people that go through some horrible event. And now, we know that just because something horrible happened to you doesn't make you a horrible person, right? And you can help other people to either avoid having that
Mhm.
happen. We can teach prevention. We can have insights into, hey, maybe that wouldn't have happened to me if I had this. There are things. So there's just all kinds of. But I think that does something probably to somebody just exiting. I think it helps the mental attitude of the
Right.
concept of self, right? Because all of it, like I said, when we want to change, we want to have a positive um, grasp of ourselves. We want to see ourselves empowered, and that's all part of the healing. So when there's this, there are people advising the president who went through this terrible experience, right? And you could even think, hey, well, then it can be survived. It can be, I
Yeah.
can do this, right? Don't you think that has helped the culture a little bit? And
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, within
I
our
mean,
movement, it's helped the culture. I mean, and I think maybe people out there in the regular world, they may have stumbled across that concept, so that they know, oh, well, what's human trafficking? And, oh, we have these people that, we know a lot about it, and We've got Lynn's Warriors. We've got Marti MacGibbon. We got a lot of people. We can show you what human
Yes.
trafficking. We can show you
Yes.
what you can do about it. Right?
Yes. I just want to be clear on something, because I use the word survivor.
Yeah.
And I'm in full like support. That's what we
Yeah.
do with like our monies and things, supporting them, helping them with their food, with their expenses.
Yeah.
But I was thinking recently, it's like, how can I say this to you, Marty? But you already know this. It's like when I started sometimes going to events, and I'll use a show business term, like dog and pony show.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they would like parade them out there, and then I'd
Mhm.
see they'd give them a Target gift card, and
Ugh.
and then it would be like a them and us kind of weird thing.
Yes.
Remember, I'm no expert. Like I
Woody.
would see that, and I would
Yeah.
think like, this is weird, cringy,
Yeah.
kind of like I would think,
Exploitative.
and
It's
so
almost exploitative.
so I'm like, okay, lived experience expert, whatever. Again, I use the word survivor, but like
Yeah. I do too, but I
we
was
have
just
to like
trying
have
to
a
use
new we have to have like a new thing, like we're focusing on like your career. I'm not even saying this the right way,
yeah,
like all your
experts.
accomplishments, not just
Experts,
that
yeah.
dog and pony show. And
Yeah.
so I do think you're speaking out.
Yeah.
Warriors, we're going to really be speaking out even more and more. And that we have
Yeah.
to support the survivors. We have to have,
We
we have to have companies that are willing to, this is a whole other thing, have entry level jobs, job training within their
Oh, we
companies.
have some
Where
of
people
those.
can make, there's not enough. There's never enough
Yeah.
housing.
There's not enough yet, but there are
There's
some.
never, right. But so this is the good news. So it's all coming out.
Maybe we can get subsidy, like Department of Labor subsidy. There are probably ways to try to get a foot in the door. Maybe somebody already has begun.
Well, we have to collaborate,
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah.
Nobody can
Because
work in
job
these separate
placement.
silos. We have to
Yeah.
come together and
Yeah.
really make this work if we're going to change this whole culture of all of this. And
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
yeah. And
that's one of the things. Yeah. It's a
addiction.
wheel. You know what I call it, Marty? A wheel with a lot of spokes. And then
Yeah.
it's the domestic
And
violence,
they
the human
intersect.
trafficking, the addiction,
Yeah.
the mental health. And all of this is making this wheel go around. But somehow we got to like stop it, pick it apart, put
Well,
it back together. That helps.
I think the wheels are going to fall off. You know what I mean? They're going to
Yeah.
fall off if we address, like you're doing. If we address poverty, we address violence. There are things like that are, I mean, exponential or existential and exponential things that are happening, right? And there's a lot of stuff. For instance, I've taken. I think you can get a degree in this, which would be so cool. They have a degree, I think, in violence prevention. But I've taken some classes in my continuing education on violence prevention. And there's a whole science that all these different things that contribute to violence, to someone being a victim of violence or someone to being a perpetrator of violence. And there are simple things that could be alleviated, like being able to sleep, get enough sleep at night. There's kids that are in neighborhoods where it's so loud that they're not getting enough sleep, right? Or there's kids that don't have enough to eat. But there are all these things. When they look at that, they're like, we're addressing violence prevention, and it's fascinating, and it's so exciting to know that there are people doing that. And there's actually a conference once a year, violence prevention conference. And so when you get into that kind of broad level of how can we reduce the amount of violence in our country, right? How can we address, and there are people doing this. There's, like you said, we've got to get together. And I think the next step for us all, and we're moving into it now, is to kind of work together. We know that we are all
Collaboration.
Say there's all those wheels of torture, with the crimes, right? But guess what? There's a big steamroller. We're starting up the steamroller where we have all these things that we're addressing, right? We may not run across the human trafficking, like we might be just in the fight to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner for kids that don't have enough to eat. In that fight, they're going to run across some trafficking. You know what I mean? And in our thing, we're going to run. But if we're all together and we're moving against all, and I think that is going to happen. I feel like it's a groundswell.
Well, that's our mission statement. Is
and we'll just steamroll those wheels.
No, but like true collaboration. Well, that's a whole nother program. Well, Marti MacGibbon, I have to let you go, but
yeah,
I want to, we need a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 4. I want everybody to go to martimacgibbon.com. I will have everything in the body of this video. I want everybody, and I'm urging everybody to support Marti. I think you have an event maybe coming up. In a couple of days. I saw something online.
I'm doing a book signing. I'm doing a book signing in Foster City. It's a city in Silicon Valley. And I don't have all the information, but it's on LinkedIn.
No, I got information here. I'm going to put it all in the body of you're a humorous. You're described as a humorous, inspirational speaker.
I am.
So I want you to give them that humor, because I think humor.
I will.
It cuts through talking about all of this.
My books are funny. Easier. I wrote my book. I wrote my memoirs. Whenever possible, they're funny. So I wanted people to be able to maybe cry on one page and then get a couple of pages and then be laughing. And that's what people tell me they have happen when they read it.
Good,
so
because that's what the doctor, that's the medicine. That's what the doctor ordered for the minds, the body, the healing, holistic.
And then I'm going to be, I'm setting up a deal to go to Indiana in October. So I'm going to be doing a speaking event there.
Busy October for you.
It'll be in October. Then I'm going to Mentari, and I'm going to be working there. And I'll be looking. I'll text you. And I hope
you certainly will. Now that I know you'll be here, but Marti, I don't even know where to begin with you.
And then I'm speaking in November. I'm giving a speech on post-traumatic growth and trauma resolution for the Texas Corrections Association.
Oh, that I like.
Yeah. So I'm going to be speaking to all those professionals because I want them to find out about the beauty of post-traumatic growth and vicarious post-traumatic growth. So I get to do that.
We need to do a show. I want to do another segment on like the justice system and break that down with you, because there's so many issues to talk about here. But Marti MacGibbon, I don't know what to say to you. I want to thank you though. I can't thank you enough.
Move to New York. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just going to have to move to New York. I'm going to have.
Where are you? I mean, why aren't you here? I mean, come on.
We're going to have to move to New York. This is where all
there's a lot going on. There's a lot to build. There are a lot of holes to plug in. We need our warriors here. But Marti, let us speak again soon. Promise me. I would like to do something on the justice system. We have to go near that's another one. We got to talk about and break through and what people have to understand. You are just fantastic. I have waited a while to talk to you. I'm so happy we made it happen. We started the relationship, and I want to thank you for helping so many people and doing it with a laugh. You truly are the meaning of a warrior in our book, and you are just fantastic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. MartiMacGibbon.com is the website. We will definitely speak again soon.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to all your warriors.
Thanks, Marti.
Bye-bye.